All right, I want to talk about background images on mobile devices, and this actually came up. Uh, Somebody brought up a question saying, "Hey, why is my background image for a banner looking so terrible on a mobile device?" Well, uh, there's some different reasons that that can happen. If you're using the background size property with the value of cover, that will look great on a browser that is for desktop, for instance. Oops, let's actually get out of that for a second. So if you were to look at this browser, this is a desktop browser, you can see that it's doing the background cover property just fine, and it's filling up the space. And right now it's set so that it's the HTML tag that actually has the property. Okay, and so that's how it's set up in the regular style sheet. All right, and then the problem that we have, and you'll notice also that you see it says not mobile. What it's doing, I wrote a script that will go and find the user agent. So it's a server superglobal array using the key of HTTP underscore user underscore agent. And I'll show you that in the code in a second. What it does is it grabs this information. And if you were to go and look, there's an article I can point you to. Actually, I put some notes in the code when I was looking some stuff up. But anyway, the thing that is common in all browsers that are mobile is it has the pattern of MOBI. And that's something that I can point you to the Mozilla Developer Network article that explains that. And so if you were to do a string search for MOBI to see if it's true or not, then you would find that you can use that as the search pattern to see if something is mobile or not, because MOBI doesn't exist anywhere in a desktop version, okay, in any of the desktop rendering engines or OSs or you know browser names or anything like that. So that's how this is working. And based on whether or not it's mobile, um, it is making some decisions about how to treat that background image, whether it's for the entire HTML background or whether it's just the background image for a banner. In this case, you can see that it's set so that when we resize it, it does all sorts of interesting things here, okay, on a browser window. Now, if we quickly take a look, I also have I have my iPad mini attached to this computer. Let's make it a little bit bigger. It's a little too big, I guess. There, I have my iPad mini attached, and I also have an iPhone 4 attached right now. And so that is how I'm capturing this information visually, so we can make the iPhone 4 a little bit bigger too. And then if you look at this iPhone 4, right, you can see that the user agent, if you were to kind of target in, you've got that MOBI right there. That's that pattern. And you'll also notice that the same is going to be true as well here. You've got the MOBI here in the word mobile for this iPad. Now I'm going to just really quickly change the orientation of my iPhone, okay, and you'll notice that the background image on this iPhone is really, really clear. Okay, and one of the things too that you might want to pay attention to is up here in the browser. You can see that's the pathway for the browser. But what I want to show you is that it's looking at my local computer. And if you want to know how to do this, normally you would have to upload stuff to a web server in order to see it through PHP if you're looking at a different device, right? So that you can use the network to get to it. But what you can do is you can look at what your local network is, and as long as all your devices are on the same wireless network, let's take a look at system preferences for my Mac. And this is my Mac that's hosting the Apache and MySQL service, right? So if I go over here to where it says network, on a Mac, and I go down here to advanced. I look at TCP/IP, and this is my IP address that is on my local wireless network for this device. And so that's how I can know that another computer on the network can find me by going to that. They can't, like I can't type localhost on my iPhone or on my iPad, right? But I can type the actual IP address that is on the router that is doling out all of these wireless addresses. So that's a way for you to be able to do that, by the way, if you don't want to have to upload your stuff to the server just for testing. And this is, of course, as long as you've got, like MAMP or JAMP or something like that running with your Apache service. Okay. Anyway, so what I was also going to show you here, let me change my orientation again, and I want to show you the thing that was in question. Actually, let's go ahead and take a look at this mobile agent window as well. You can see the way that this ends up looking here. And if I change my orientation, and by the way, I also just wrote a little script that will, alert us whenever it detects a resizing of the browser. Okay, and that's based on the way that I've got some of this code written. But the important thing is that you can really see here, here, let me make this iPhone even bigger on my screen. You can see that the quality of that image is not broken down at all. If I were to go and look at the page of the student's work in question, whenever she's asking me to take a look at stuff, you can see what's happening. Her background image isn't even showing up properly in landscape view. And if I go here in portrait view, you can see that the quality of that image is not very good. It's all blurred out. That happens on the iOS in Safari. That's a really common behavior. And if I wanted to, let's also take a peek at it here as well. I think it's this screen. Okay, and so I can make this a little bit bigger so you can kind of see what's going on. But you can see, like, on whenever there's a little bit more real estate, as opposed to over here on this iPhone 4 where the screen is really small, and I think it's like 320 in portrait view in terms of the width. It's just blowing all this out. It's blurring it really badly. It's less blurry in the larger iPad mini, but it's still pretty crummy. If I do orientation change, I can show you that you can see just a little bit more, but it's still kind of, not that easy to see, right? That is in harsh contrast, really different than, say, something like this, right? Well, let's take a look at how this is behaving. Let's go into Dreamweaver really quickly. And this is the one just for the banner. It's not for the entire HTML background image. It's the one for the banner. And the way that the style sheet is set up is you can see that we have a header, and it basically, for the normal style sheet, what it's doing is it's loading a file that is 2,000 pixels wide, and so it's by 1333 tall. So it's a landscape orientation, and that landscape orientation, as you well know, can be really complicated if you were to just tell it to be 100%, right? Because then in a portrait view, vertical view, it's not going to fill the screen properly. So you have to have a way of detecting. There are some media query types where you can check to see if it's landscape or portrait, but those don't necessarily work with all mobile browsers properly. It doesn't always work right, at least not in my experience. And so anyway, you can see that that's how that's set. And let's take a peek over here back at the source code. And what I want to show you is if we expand out this function, first thing on line 3 is that we're defining the user agent. Okay, and so we're storing it in a variable called agent. And then I'm writing a function, and I'm calling it isMobile, because we're checking to see if something is mobile or not, whether the agent's mobile. And then to pull this this agent variable in, I have to call it as a global variable because it's inside of a function. Remember, we have to give it a global scope. If it's created outside of a function, then we have to pull in global scope and to pull it into the function. So I say global agent, and then down below, this is where I'm checking to see if Mobi, if MOBI exists as a string inside of the agent variable, which is defined as the server superglobal of HTTP user agent. All right, and so, and just as a reminder, by the way, that is all of this stuff, right, that's getting generated and pulled out, right, where it says Mozilla 5.0, iPad, blah, 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 right, okay, all that. Okay, so let's jump back over here. And anyway, so it's saying, it's using, and I've shown you string str, but if we want it to be case insensitive, just in case, no pun intended, you would do str. So it's the I is for insensitive. So so what we're doing is str, and we're for the first argument we're putting in the haystack or the thing that we're looking inside of, and the second argument that we're passing is the string that is referred to as the needle. It's the needle we're looking for inside the haystack, okay? And so basically it's going to return whether, this is going to return whether it's true or false. And so I'm saying if it's identical to the Boolean value of false, then I can echo out as an HTML comment, this is not a mobile browser, okay? Otherwise, else, right, we can go down here and I can echo out, this is a mobile browser, or mobile browser script or something like that is coming up. And then I'm echoing, and this in double quotes, if you remember right, in double quotes, I can escape a new line character and a tab character, and that's just so I can visually format it in the HTML when I'm inspecting the element. It formats it so it's not all run together on one line, all right? And then I concatenate it with a single dot, and then I start my single quote for a string, and all of this stuff, okay, is that. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating an embedded style in the head. So I use the style tag, and then I'm creating a new rule that is going to override what was in my styles.css, right? My header rule was on lines 10 through 13 using this background size of cover, right? And it was also using this large picture that was 2000 pixels wide. Well, I want to override that by creating an embedded style when it detects that it's a mobile browser. And first of all, I'm going to make it use a smaller picture. So this one's only 1200 wide. And remember, because a lot of these devices are going to be Retina display devices, the trick about that is that, you know, they'll have usually sometimes double the pixel density, right? So this would actually look really nice on almost any size for the most part. In terms of, you know, handheld devices. Okay, so and then I'm saying no repeat, and then it's going to be horizontally centered, and 0, I'm anchoring it basically to the top. Okay, and then I'm telling it to be fixed so that it doesn't scroll. And then I'm changing the background size here, okay, so that by default I'm telling it to be auto, which is going to be automatic width left and right, and I'm telling it to be 100 VH for the vertical height. And that is just a choice that I chose to make, but I'm not using cover, right? Cover is what tends to not look good on an iPhone. So if I do something like this, the initial way that it's going to load before it even detects whether or not it's portrait or not. I could have detected first if it was portrait or landscape and then made a decision, but just to be simple, I just went ahead and chose one that is somewhat safe. So for either view. And so anyway, I chose this, and then I end my embedded style here, and then the next thing I'm doing is I'm echoing again, I'm doing a new line and I'm tabbing it in, and I'm echoing a script for the jQuery, full jQuery CDN library. Okay, so I go and I grab the full jQuery library, and then I am on the next line, I'm grabbing the jQuery mobile minified library. And I actually have that file downloaded into my folder, and so I'm referring to it not through the CDN, but I'm actually grabbing the file out of my file system. And then next line, I'm starting a new script, and this is a script that basically I'm able to use this because it's part of the jQuery mobile library. So I'm basically looking for orientation change, and I'm running a function where if the window orientation is equal to 0, then that is going to identify it as portrait. Now, here's the thing, there are some browsers where this is going to be exactly the opposite, but it's not very many. And so I could have gone crazy with this, but you know, this is going to take care of most modern browsers in handheld devices. So, you know, this is where you pick and choose your battles. There are lots of other ways that you could do it with like reams and reams of lines of media queries in your CSS, but I hate that too. So anyway, basically I'm seeing if it's a portrait view, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this header CSS so that the background size is auto. And actually, I'm not even changing it. I could have left that alone, right? Otherwise, if it's landscape, I'm changing it so that the background size is 100%, because landscape for a landscape-oriented image should go 100%. And so, yeah. And then down here, I don't actually have a style sheet that is called styles-mobile.css, but I just wanted to show you that you could load a separate style sheet that just has like appended styles for mobile in there as well. Like, you know, I could have changed my font size. I could have done all sorts of stuff. If I wanted my fonts to look bigger in mobile views, sometimes you want them to look bigger in landscape than you do maybe in portrait, you know, or maybe smaller actually in landscape, however you want, right? So anyway, but this is the function that I wrote, and you know, you're free to use this and try it out on your own stuff. And you know, also I would recommend that you kind of play around with some of these values for background size to see what suits your images the best. And then if you come down below on line 57 inside the head, I'm running that is mobile function, because remember, everything that I wrote that's supposed to get echoed out in that function is the kind of stuff that would all go in the head, right? So like links to style sheets and script tags and things like that. And notice that I'm loading it after I've already manually loaded my regular style sheet, so that anything that I load in line 57 will override any of the styles that were called up in line 56. And then if you come down here to line 62, this little bit in the H1, it's just a really quick little if-else statement that's looking to see if the agent is mobile or not, right? And then down below on line 76, it's just where I'm printing out the agent information. So that's this simple little script, right? And it works pretty well. I tested it in lots of different things. I can also show you what it looks like in an Android. Okay, over here on the right is my Android, and you can see the difference between the way that that same website looks on an Android, where it's showing this lovely, beautiful watercolor background image, versus the way that it looks over here on this iPhone, right? That's just right next to it, where it just blows it all out. It looks terrible. And it has to do with the way that it's reading the pixel density as a Retina display screen. Anyway, so and it's really only going to happen with mobile stuff. But one of the things too that I can show you as well, let's take a peek real quick. If I'll just grab the Firefox mobile agent really quickly, and this is that little agent or it's the little thing that detects screen dimensions have changed. And anyway, so you can see how it works in Firefox. And by the way, the Android phone connection, it looks excellent and crisp and beautiful on the actual phone. And this wireless screencast on my computer screen, it looks kind of crummy. So anyway, if I do my portrait view change, you can see here, and in Firefox, it's kind of interesting. It's yeah, it's not updating very quickly over here. My screen actually isn't looking quite the same. Let's try to change it back. In fact, let's just try completely a different browser. Let's go back to Chrome and see if it behaves any better. Let's say new tab, and I'm going to go to 192. There we go. Let's take a peek at our files. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. All right, and you can see the quality on this mobile browser is tremendously good. All right, so all right, so there's that. And then if I want to show you something else too that's kind of cool, and I'm going to go over here in my Android phone and I'm going to say request desktop site. And you can see automatically what happens is that now I can pinch and zoom. It says not mobile. It's loading that information for me. And it's loading this as if it's a website that doesn't have the initial device width set up, right? That's why it looks so tiny and it's hard to read. And for me to read it, I'd have to pinch and zoom and drag stuff around. If I change the orientation, I can, oh, looks like my iPhone's battery is about to die. Anyway, you can see that I can look around a little bit, and you can also start to really see the quality of that image. I mean, it's really pretty intense, right? So, but what's important is that on my Android, whenever I tell it to request the desktop version, you can see how it changes, and then I can take that back off again. And then it loads my mobile version, and it looks nice again, okay? Now, if I wanted to take a look at, let's just go back, and there we go. And let's pick this one, okay? So you can see how it's looking. Looks like my screen is kind of messed up here. And then you get this event resize detection thing again, right? But you can see how the background image is resizing on the HTML, okay? And I'll show you that code really quickly too. Okay, so what I did was I switched out my file really quickly, and I'm now looking at the one where, let's take a peek at the CSS. You can see that instead of that background image being on the header, it's actually on the HTML tag. And the reason I put it on the HTML tag, all right, this is kind of important, is because if you put it on the body tag, in some of the browsers, what's going to happen is that it is going to not fill the screen properly. So what I did was I created an HTML tag, and I put it on the HTML because that absolutely will fill the viewport. But then the other thing too is that I put a page wrapper, and I made the min height 100 VH. There's nothing wrong with doing that, as long as, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing that, right? So if you were to look at this code, in case you can't seem to quite get it to fit right, that's one of the things that you can do. So on this, I've got the HTML, the entire document has a background image. And the default, if you remember, if you look up here, it's actually set to have a background size of cover for normal browsers and desktop views. And then I've got this, inside the body, I've got this section whose ID is page wrapper. And the default in the style sheet is to have it be a min height of 100 VH, right? And that's not going to mess anything up, okay? As long as, you know, everything is in that wrapper. Okay, it can't really have anything else outside of that wrapper. Otherwise, then you would have something that is going to give you a scroll bar. So if you were to look here at this function on line 5, let's drop that down. Everything is basically the same, with the exception, of course, of this HTML business. The other thing too is I've got some other stuff where, like, I made the font size change in this a little bit, so that it's a little bit bigger in the mobile view. So that's something else you could play around with. And again, I changed it to that smaller picture. But one of the things that you'll notice is that I've got it set to cover as my initial size for the HTML. And this is something that you could mess around with as well. But down here, I have it set so that it changes. Again, I've got the auto 120 VH. And the reason I have this as 120 VH is that it goes a little past the browser window so that you don't have this weird shortening event happening. Now, this is the other thing that I added that I didn't have in my last file, and it was just so that I knew whether or not the browser was detecting an event change, and so I pulled that up. So if you didn't want that to happen, you decide to use this code, you can just remove the line, the alert on line 33 and the alert on line 38. Anyway, but you're welcome to mess around with this. Oh, and by the way, this is the article that you might want to take a peek at. I put it in the comments. So if we took a peek at that, let's open a new window, and you can look and see, read this where it says browser detection using user agent. Anyway, if you go down to the bottom, there's a whole bunch. I encourage you to read the whole article. In summary, we recommend looking for the string Mobi anywhere in the user agent to detect a mobile device. Okay, so, and the only thing that is going to be running an actual mobile user agent is an actual mobile device. That's why, like, if you were to go, let's just take a peek here at something. It's right here. If you were to go into the inspector, all right, on a desktop computer, and you were to click to toggle responsive, look what it says. It still says not mobile. It's doing its best job that it can, but this is not a mobile user agent, right? And there is nothing on a desktop that is going to let you really and truly be able to see that. Now, look what it's doing. This is a iPad mini, right? This is the way it's showing me that it looks on an iPad mini. Let's actually jump over here. This window visually is approximately the same size as my mobile agent over here, my true mobile browser. And you see over in the, where it's trying to do its best, it's saying it's not mobile, and over here, of course, it says it's mobile. But they don't exactly look the same. I mean, look at the size of the background image. Look at the, you know, look at the scale of the text. It's just not the same. And so just be aware that even though you can kind of do your best to get something that is similar using this inspector mobile tool, it's just not going to be the same. Anyway, all right, that's going to be it. Hopefully that's helpful.